I've actually been to a Kiss concert before. And when you go to a Kiss concert, it is all about the experience, right? And I remember more of my Kiss concert moment than I actually do listening to Kiss like on a radio or an album, right? And so the revolutionary aspect, the visionary aspect of your father was really genius about that. And I think you did a really great job of showcasing that. How did you have to think through those moments, though? Because those are not easy elements to put into a film, because it can get really lost in translation.
For sure. I mean, to begin with, I needed to understand what made him and Casablanca different, what made that particular unique collection of artists different at the time, and what was revolutionary about the acts of those acts at the time. And you know, Kiss, there was nobody like them. And the truth is, the experience is the experience, but the songs too. You can't be a gimmick and still be selling out 50 years later. And it's 50 years they're still on tour. Yeah. And I know it's the final one. I don't believe that
it's
for a second either. No one
until the
that.
next tour.
But you know, it's unique to Kiss. They had a number of albums that were out on radio, and nobody cared, and nobody came, and they could not break through. And it wasn't until they embraced Kiss Alive, of course, and captured the sound of being at that concert, when you had all these kids kind of feeling like, I was at that concert, I was part of it, which then extended to the Kiss Army. Be part of it. Where I think my father's true genius was in understanding, even back then in the 60s and the 70s, that entertainment was a collective event, not an isolated one, and that the experience of these acts meant being part of those acts. And when you look at the extension of Kiss, literally the people in the audience are dressed the same way. They are the band. There's the line in the film, which is a true one my father said, about how they also wrote their songs with only 4 or 5 power chords, which meant any kid at home could get a guitar, and 20 minutes later they could be Kiss. But I think that extended to Donna Summer. I think that extended to, you did not go to a Parliament concert without feeling like you were Parliament, that you somehow had been landed down in that spaceship. So I think that really was the magic, that he created a magic carpet ride for all of us. And I think 50 years later we're still riding it. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to the Conversation, the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in conversation with this gentleman in front of me. We met during quarantine, and we had the chance to strike up an incredible friendship where he and I will actually do Zooms with each other and have the most fascinating conversations about what was happening in society at our time. He may or may not have inspired an op-ed that was written that we still need to do something with, though, by the way. And this whole time he kept telling me about this movie that he was making called Spinning Gold, about his father, Neil Bogart. And I've been dying for this movie to get made, and it is out. It is made. I have seen it. It is incredible. And I have the son of Neil Bogart, who is here, Mr. Timothy Scott Bogart. What is happening, Tim?
It's so good to be here with you.
I can't believe
person.
In person.
In person. No screens, no monitors.
Nothing. It's just me and you, my man.
Yeah.
Tim, congratulations on this film.
Thank you.
This film is about your father who started Casablanca Records. Casablanca Records, folks, you should know it, but if you are not aware, it is with Kiss, The Village People, Donna Summer, Bill Withers, Gladys Knight. I mean, the list could go on.
It's extraordinary. It actually goes back. So Gladys and Withers and Curtis Mayfield, they were on Buddha, which was right before Casablanca. But you look at that kind of scope of artists that he worked with. It's Ron Isley. I mean, it's extraordinary.
So wait, I want to get the story right, because what I'm fascinated, Tim, about this movie is just how much of a visionary your father was. And I'm wondering, not all of us get the chance to tell our parents' story, like in this incredible way. How did you approach the thought process to even want to tell the story to film? Because we all have incredible grandparents or mothers or fathers. Like, there should be a story about you. You should write a book. And not only that, you wrote a film. And you made a film. You actually produced a film. So, like,
that's true.
What was the thought process behind it?
Well, I mean, I was quite young when he passed. I was 12, but he was such a larger-than-life character, as I think all parents are to some degree. But as I sort of moved into doing this for a living, I suddenly realized I have the greatest story. And I don't have to make it up. I just kind of inherited this incredible character, this incredible story. And I just thought it was unbelievably universal because, music biopics, which I've always loved, and just historical pieces, which I've always loved. I think about the great music biopics. I can't be Ray Charles. I wasn't gifted like that, right? I can't be Aretha Franklin. I don't have that voice. Maybe I could be my dad, because he didn't have that extra gift that was sort of, God, sent from above that talent. He just had the absolute relentless perseverance of his dreams, and ultimately along the way found these other like-minded dreamers. I always kind of looked at them as the island of misfit toys. I just thought they were such a crazy group of characters who, maybe because of the time, maybe because of the period it was, but they really did live a fantasy and a fairy tale. It just so happened to be true. So for me, as a storyteller, I mean, my gosh, it just landed in my lap. And I think it was a little bit of a red herring in terms of how easy it would be to get made. I mean, I started this literally 24 years ago. I said the first, for real, an option with a studio in 1999.
No way.
I don't think there's been a single day I wasn't pushing that boulder up the hill since. But early on, there were so many people who wanted the rights or thought it'd be a great project. And every time we'd get close, someone would suddenly go, oh, but it's actually not a biopic about Donna Summer. And it's not a biopic about Kit. It's a
Groundedness you did about who your father was.
Thank you. I mean, as the son, I think any effort to begin with of doing the story and not being honest would have just been such a failed effort. So I knew that kind of going in that was a challenge I needed to face. But the more I got into it, and this maybe a hot take, maybe I tend to think that my father's flaws were equally his superpowers. I mean, this man was, yes, a womanizer, yes, an addict, yes, a gambler. If he wasn't that gambler and that addict, there's no Casablanca, there's no Kiss, there's no Donna. And so to tell the story of a visionary willing to risk it all without understanding what kind of character is willing to risk it all, you have to look at those flaws. And to me, also as a storyteller, I think human beings tend to be messy. I think that's what makes them interesting. And my commitment early on, and my compass was to be as messy and honest as I could be. And even that extended to, yes, the affair on my mom with my stepmom. But I also found it so interesting. He was madly in love with two women at the same time. That was a fact. I thought that was fascinating, and it's something I hadn't really seen before. And I don't think he ever could have become who he became without the marriage to my mom, no question. Nor could he have ever become who he became without his ultimate marriage to my stepmom. I thought that was interesting.
But I also to enjoy, now that we're talking about this, hot take, is that what I gather, and I don't know if this is true or not, but my takeaway after having watched the film and then listening to this conversation right now is where we are in open society today, where people are okay with having non-traditional relationships,
I think that's true.
and or marriages. And what I gathered was that your mom, and I don't know, but for me, I don't know if it was necessarily okay, but as it was acceptable. Because I love that line where she says in the movie, she says, I was okay to share the bed with you, but not necessarily the love.
Yeah, and
right?
I think that's, look, it was.
I thought that was a powerful line.
Thank you. I mean, it was absolutely the 1970s. I mean, there's no question. You know, it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it was sex before it was deadly. I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
Drugs were just a different thing back then. Of course, rock and roll was rock and roll, but I do believe she was fully aware for quite a long time. I do believe there was sort of this just deal made that was okay, and I think it was okay up until the point where I think she felt it no longer served her. And at that point, I think very boldly she said, I'm done with you, not the other way around. And I think my mom really owned that choice in life. She knew exactly who she was, who he was, and who they were together, and he had become something else, and that no longer interested her.
Which is a powerful feminist movement unto itself,
so.
Right? Like claiming your agency as a woman to say, I'm okay with you sharing your bed until this is no longer serving me, right? And then now it's not serving me, I'm out, right? And taking agency and owning that. But I love how we're even talking about how you said his flaws was his strengths, right?
Absolutely.
And the greater the risk, the greater the reward. We've all heard these theories, but I think the reason I love Spinning Gold is because it brings those into light. I recall watching Game of Thrones, and there was an episode where DC was dating, at the time, the most richest man in the whole universe of Game of Thrones, and there's a scene when they're on a date, he opens up the vault, and he was like, this is all the riches in all the world. And she says to him, how does a man like you acquire such wealth? And he says, I had done things that a wise man would not be proud of, right? And I look at that even to this day, of how many of the greats that we uphold and look up to, how many decisions and choices and morality have been questioned, and morality is relative to your own moral compass, right?
Without question.
And so I think about how people have gotten to the top, right? There is this risk taking that is involved, and there may be things or entities or impacts of that who may be in their wake, right? On that path.
And I think that extended beyond just his marital life. I think it extended to his relationship with the artists. That in Casablanca days and Buddha days, there was no distinction between business and family. Everybody was together, but that also made for some very messy things. I mean, I always sort of envision the movie to some degree as a person kind of at the end of their life arriving at the pearly gates, and someone going, oh, wait a minute, not you.
Yeah.
You came to you took the wrong door. You don't belong here. And him going, but wait, look, I know I did this thing, but let me try to explain why. I know I did that other thing. And when you get to relationships he had with Donna Summer, and that history is quite clear about how he absolutely instigated her to become something she was absolutely not. LaDonna Gaines played a character named Donna Summer, just like Chaim Witz played a character named Gene Simmons, and Stanley Eisen played a character named Paul Stanley, and George Clinton was wearing 3-piece suits before he suddenly came from outer space. All of these people were playing the parts of the roles in life they dreamed of being, and actually because they met together became that. But it was messy along the way. Financing was messy along the way.
Yeah.
Relationships with these artists. And so to not also share that complexity, I also thought would not be doing a service to the story.
Audience, when I tell you, so Tim, we do share moments where there are moments of music biopics that I do enjoy, right? But there's oftentimes, I don't like when a biopic, music or non-related, goes from cradle to grave, right? I love biopics that have a very specific time period or a subject matter. But I loved what you were able to do with this. It is in part a biopic as it is a creative narrative through the lens of an accurate story, as it is a part musical that is not a musical at all, but it's just very like this lyrical film of sorts. And I loved, audience, is that when I wasn't an expert in Casablanca records at all, just knew very top line, but of course I knew George Clinton, of course I knew Donna Summers, but I actually was like, no way. In every scene, no way. Like the idea that Donna Summers really wasn't Donna Summers, right? Kiss really wasn't Kiss behind that makeup. But there's two things, and clearly you have to come back. I knew it was going to happen. I could talk to you for hours, so we shouldn't have gone this long without ever having communicated. But I love in two parts, I want to lean in on the visionary that was your father, right? And the visionary of Kiss. And this isn't much of a spoiler alert, but as much as your father found a way to connect the audience with Kiss. In the sense from this very static dynamic that was being presented to this very experiential moment, right? And there was a part in the movie that I think really wraps up, when I wouldn't say wraps up, but really sits at this intersection of the visionary that was your father, the person and or the singer or musician becoming the character, and your directorial ability. And I feel, or without giving anything away, came during the Donna Summers moment, right? And I'm not going to say where it comes in the film, but in the Donna Summers moment. Talk to me how you thought about directionality and making those decisions to show it that way, right? Now, I don't know if the story went as it was told, but the shots, the edit, the pacing of it, you did a brilliant job. And you held me. And I'm even going to be honest, audience. I was watching this movie on a plane, and we were at the peak of this scene, and I refused to get up. Thank God I knew the person to the left of me. I refused to get up to get the baggage until after that scene had concluded. Wow. That's how much you hooked me on this journey of that.
Well, I mean, that really began, like most of these stories, right at the heart, where I would sit with Donna before her passing. I said, what story has not been told that you think should be told? And I never promised anyone that I would do what they told me, but I wanted certainly to hear what they thought had not been told. And, you know, in a very uncomfortable way, she described to me as the son, it's how your father manipulated me. And now, you know, the interesting thing is, did he? It appears so. Did she become the biggest star in the world at the time? She did as a result. Did she agree to go along with it? She certainly embraced that. But was it a challenge to who she was, a church-going woman, and suddenly becoming this, you know, sexual icon? That was a real conflict for her. And it was very important to her for her audience to understand that it really wasn't who she was, and that the people who were behind her, my father, the label, was building and manicuring this image that was not her. That particular scene is it is a couple scenes that are put together for, you know, for sort of the narrative punch of it all, but it was Donna telling me about the courage she had to find in herself to get into that recording studio and lay down on the floor and do what was required of that scene. And so when I was working with the great Taylor Parks, who portrays her, before hiring her, I said, it's all about this scene. And whether you're going to have the same courage that Donna did to confront that raw, honestly. And Taylor, I would say, absolutely rose that occasion. But interestingly, I thought that would be the scene that I'd lose every audience member, because they would lose their ability to like my father. And interestingly, in every test audience, it's absolutely one of everyone's favorite scenes.
It's my favorite scene.
I don't know what that says. I don't know what that says about how I approached it, but I'm so honored that I captured what Donna felt was important to her.
I'm trying to give you your props too as well about the perfect intersectionality of it. Like, you did such a great job of directing it. It was handled with care. You can tell that you weren't trying to embarrass the legacy of Donna Summer, because there were moments I thought you were going to go there, but you held back on the cut, right? But you also too wasn't trying to show your dad as his manipulator, but there's a moment where you show both willing participants.
Well, and that's the key.
At play with it.
Both of those people needed that to happen that way.
But we also, you did a great job of showing, you know, the vision of your father to know what was needed, right? Based upon a party that happened in a couple of scenes previously. And
that was real. I was there. I shouldn't have been.
You should not have been.
I should not have been there.
I want to talk more about that off the microphone. But it also too showed, like, I mean, now we would call that data, right? Like, there was data and research that suggested this needed to happen
Yep.
in order for this thing to click. I didn't know that you had talked to Donna, and this only makes sense now that we're
Yeah.
talking about it that you had. So I want to ask you
Extensively.
something, because it's rare that you get a chance to talk to someone who became a character
Yeah.
and then came out of character.
Yep.
Meaning LaDonna Gaines became Donna Summer, who then towards the end
I
led
think
her
did
life
come back
as
to LaDonna.
LaDonna
I think that's
Gaines,
absolutely true.
right?
Yeah.
What was her feeling now afterwards? I don't know if regret is the word, but was it appreciation for it? Was there something that she says, this was worth it?
I think it was great conflict to the very end for her. I really do, because it's impossible to separate any of her achievements from that character that they collaboratively created together. But there's no question it was in tremendous conflict with her personal beliefs and what she thought her path was, and yet it gave her every path she wanted in life. Even after she sort of stopped being queen of disco and was just doing other music, she was doing other music, she was doing art, but she was doing all that still as the person who became the person. So I think she had great conflict. I don't think, and I said in the movie, I don't think LaDonna Gaines ever really became Donna Summer. She just made us all think she had. And I think that is a hard thing for anyone to live with, that sort of challenge of, am I the person I wanted to be? Which I think every character in the movie to some extent does. My father certainly does.
Yeah.
That journey he took. Look, I think Gene and Paul are very happy they became who they became.
But it's also
George
too,
Clinton's very happy he became who he became.
but you even think about, so I mean, so one, salute to you, my brother, because I have so many thoughts in my head. I'm trying to get out into an articulate statement. This is the power of great art, right? Great art is when you can leave it, whether you're viewing it on a wall, you're looking at it on a magazine, or you're observing this sculpture in its natural positioning, or you're watching it on a screen where you can still find ways to unpack it and to talk about it and still find ways of discovering it through conversation. And what I'm noticing is that I'm still unpacking this movie through the conversation, and something I'm pulling out right now that I'm feeling is like the price, I wouldn't say it's the price of fame, but what are you willing to do for your goal?
For sure.
Right? Whatever your goal is. Your goal may not be fame, but to be CEO, to own your own company, or to step out of your marriage, or to own your own agency, personal agency, whatever that is. There's often a cost that comes with that, right? And we all pay a cost.
Enormous cost.
Whatever that cost may be. And for me, I think that I thought it was going to be, my takeaway after watching it was, what do you do with time?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think my takeaway for this is, what is the cost you're willing to pay?
I think all of those things are resonant in this piece, and this may feel overly precious, but I always thought, as a person who sees 4 or 5 movies a week, pre-COVID in the theaters, it always sort of nothing's worse than the credits come up and you stand up and you turn to the person with you and go, so where do you want to eat? Right? There's nothing to talk about, and I thought this was a piece about human beings that was worthy to spark some of these conversations, which is a very highfalutin kind of aspiration. But I do think, at least from the screenings we've had, I do think it achieves a lot of that, where different people take different things. There's people who I've talked to who have said, I do think it's about time. Other people, I do think it's about regret. I do think it's about purpose. But as my father's character questions whether he matters.
Yeah.
And ultimately, as a filmmaker, with all of these ideas, my commitment was to not pass judgment or make an assessment one way or the other, but to leave it for the audience.
And duality. And duplicity. Right?
Duality and duplicity without question.
Because now I'm thinking about Kiss.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I'm thinking about Kiss, their origin story, their constitution, their race, right? Their culture, right? Their religion, and then the masking of it through makeup and hair, and then fluidity, not fluidity. I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. I love how you brought one of the characters who was a manager, not to give too much away, right?
Yeah.
But I loved how he was always in conversation with Kiss, right? Conversation meaning on screens and scenes together. And so that made me think about certain things with Kiss. And also too, and now you got me curious about well, shit. Since we're here, Tim,
Yeah.
obviously you talked to the Village people?
Yeah.
Because I actually left bothered in that scene.
Well, but
Once I discovered that only one of them was the actual singer.
I know Victor Willis, but it's true. You know,
I feel like it was all a lie. Tim, my whole YMCA
let me tell you something. A lot
bar
of it,
nights,
let me
right?
tell you, a lot of it,
Team building
lot of it
exercises was a lie.
a lot of it was a lie. Now, not the impact it had on you.
Yeah, that's
That was
true.
real, right? I mean, and that's one. I mean, you get to that moment in the movie, and
I'm upset now, Tim.
I could have got another hour.
Yeah.
I kind of got into that story because it's unbelievably fascinating
Yeah.
how Victor Willis was the only voice.
I was either damn near a choir.
No, I'll tell you a really quick story on that one. It was, of course, produced by these two, French producers, Andre Belolo and Jacques Morale, and they had worked with this guy named Victor Willis, who at the time was on Broadway in The Wiz, playing the Cowardly Lion, they had put this together and they put it on the clubs, and it was explosive. I mean, instantly, it was just spectacular. And so Merv Griffin called my father because they had always, he'd bring acts on. He said, I must have this band on. I must have this band. And my father called Jacques and Andre and said, we must have this band on. And they said, there is no band. They had to cast a band to put the band on that first TV show, and that's the Village People that was from a casting session after the songs had come out.
My whole childhood,
I'm sorry about that.
team
I'm
exercises,
sorry about that.
teen nights at the club,
Yeah.
right?
But it shouldn't
Like
change
bar.
your feeling about the music. 'Cause
I'm
the
upset.
music was spectacular.
The
Don't be
music,
upset.
the music was authentic, but
The
like,
rest-
I thought they were choir.
No, they were not. On tour, there were singers backstage,
No way.
and they were lip syncing. Absolutely, yeah.
Mind blown. Audience, let me tell you, we haven't even scratched the surface of this movie. The stories, the way you did it, Tim, the pacing, the editing, the cinematography was brilliant.
Byron Warner,
I
amazing.
love how you directed Jeremy Jordan. He was so. It was almost he used a lot of movements, right? That I think helped with transitions, almost
Yes.
like this dancer maestro.
Tremendous performer.
kind of dynamic. The scoring, the music, my God, and you used the music at the right moments. I felt
Thank you.
right, and the stripped down version with Gladys Knight at that piano.
let us
My
see.
God, sent me. I was on the plane. I threw my hands up. I was just like, yes, this scene right here.
The great Lettucey.
I'm so glad this film is done.
Me too.
Because now we can get more films from you, right? Because you are a pure genius. I'm so happy that we finally met in
too.
person after being years electronically on Zoom with each other. So proud. Congratulations. Audience, please make sure you go see Spinning Gold. How you feel? Are your hands sweaty?
Of course. But I'm excited for, a guy who I think got lost to history to finally get the props he deserves.
Oh, I love that, son. Until next time, folks. Peace.
Thanks so much.